So, hello everyone. Very excited to see you all. We have a quorum now, which is great. So, if you guys need, I'll reshare the agenda here. So, meeting. And if we want to quickly, while you guys open that up, to a round of introductions before we get started, that would be great. So just names, pronouns. I'll put this in the chat. Pronouns, the organization that you work with, and what interests you about this subject.
Get the ball rolling, Hennessy, if you'd like.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
So I'm Joe Bagley. I'm a city archaeologist of Boston, and I'm really excited about, frankly, getting to work with everybody on this call and elsewhere on some really exciting projects. And just to keep it rolling, I'm going to pass it to Jordana.
I'm Jordana McConaughey. I am head of special collections and university archivist at Northeastern. Our special collecting focus is the history of underrepresented communities in Boston. And I also am a member of the board of the East Boston Historical Society and Museum. Tatiana.
Hi there. I'm Tatiana Cruz. My pronouns are she, her. An assistant professor and director of Africana Studies and Women's and Gender Studies at Simmons University. And I haven't met you, Jordana. I knew the person who had your job before, done a lot of research at Northeastern. And what interests me about the committee, I actually wasn't able to make it to the first meeting, so I don't know much, but I know this makes the most sense for my expertise. So I'll pass it to Kid.
Thanks very much, Tatiana. Hi, everyone. My name is Kid Wong-Sri Chanalai. I'm the Director of Research at the Massachusetts Historical Society. And so that's my full name that's on there, but you can call me Kid, K-I-D. And I'm a Civil War historian, as you can probably tell. It's Mr. Lincoln's birthday today. But we cover all parts of Massachusetts history and world history here at the MHS. We are the first historical society in the nation, and we have an unparalleled collection, and we're very much looking forward to helping this committee prepare for the 250th, but also the 400th of the city. Thank you. Oh, and I'm going to say Liza.
Thanks, Kit. I appreciate it. I'm Liza Stearns. I use she, her pronouns. I am the Director for Visitor Engagement, Education, and the Arts for the National Parks of Boston. We are a place-based organization. We have 3 national parks in Boston, including Boston African American National Historic Site, Boston National Historical Park, and the Boston Harbor Islands. This is a great group. Commemoration is big in the National Park Service, and we're really looking to work with an eclectic and diverse group of thinkers and creators and innovators to think about how we can help people forge connections to place and to one another, and to shine lights on stories that have not been told, and really think about ways to reframe the narrative in ways that is more inclusive. And with that, I will pass it along to Megan.
Hi, I'm Megan. I'm at the City of Boston Archives. I'm the archivist for reference and outreach. I also wasn't in the first meeting, and I'm here because my boss, Kristen, asked me or invited me to sit in. So I'll just pass it on to Kristen.
Hi, I'm Kristen Lafferty. I'm the archivist for the City of Boston. Yeah, I'm just excited to be here and to work to promote Boston's history with everyone. I'll pass it on to Derek.
Yes, my name is Derek Dunley. I'm not actually a member of the committee or the subcommittee, but I work for Representative Mindy Dom. Representative Dom is the chairwoman of the Tourism, Arts, and Cultural Development Committee for the state of Massachusetts. Rep Dom represents Amherst, Massachusetts, and the Hampshire 3rd. So while not part of her district, her work includes being the co-chair of the 250th anniversary of the American Revolution Commission for the statewide group under the Massachusetts State Legislature. So just eyes and ears here. Very excited to hear and see about the work you do, and I'm excited to collaborate between the Boston Commemoration Commission and the statewide 250th Commission. If you ever have questions for the larger 250th Commission at the state level, feel free to, I'll put my email in the chat. And glad to be here, and I use he, him pronouns. Sorry, I probably should have passed it on to Carolyn.
Hi, everybody. Sorry, I arrived a little late. Really glad to be here. Excited to work with all of you. Have our first subcommittee meeting. I am a public history and community archives program manager here at UMass Boston. I work in the archives in the Healy Library. I also teach public history in our graduate program here at UMass Boston. I coordinate the Mass Memories Roadshow program, which is a participatory archiving program where we partner with communities in Massachusetts to run day-long events for people to bring photos and stories, and we build digital collections in partnership with them. And I'm thrilled to be here, excited about the conversation. Thanks. Should I pass it on? I don't know who hasn't gone. Dory, have you gone already?
Yeah, thank you, Carolyn. I'm Dory Klein. My pronouns are she, her. I am the community history supervisor at the Boston Public Library. And this is a burgeoning department dedicated to supporting our patrons, our community members, in telling their own histories. As part of this work, I get to work closely with Jordana McConney and my other colleagues at NU Library, and I'm excited to be in this Zoom room with a lot of wonderful folks I know, or folks I'm excited to get to know. I'm also on the board of the History Project, and so with a nod to my buddies there, I will hand it over to Joan.
Thank you, Dory. Hi, I'm Joan Alacqua. I am the Executive Director of the History Project, and we are Boston's LGBTQ+ community archives. I use she, her pronouns, and this is my first meeting. I was away during the last one, so I'm excited to get into it. I think I'm last. Is anyone else? No? Okay. Hennessy.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm sorry. My computer just restarted out of nowhere. So I'm Hennessy. I am the Commemoration Commission Manager. My apologies, you can hear laughter and happiness in the background. I'm the Commemoration Commission Manager. My pronouns are she, her, and I am here because I am supporting you guys. So that being said, let's get started with what we have on the agenda, which is the proposal to have Joe Bagley and Bob Allison, who is not here, be the co-chairs of the subcommittee. I'm gonna launch a poll, hopefully. And yeah, so it's a motion to vote for these co-chairs. I'm gonna launch it now. Please let me know. You should be able to select both of them. And let me know if you don't get the poll. Amazing.
Can you just tell us who Bob Allison is?
Yes. Bob Allison is a professor at Suffolk University. He is a historian. He was the president of the South Boston Historical Society forever, and now he moved to East Boston, and he's getting involved there, so I hear. So he's very active and very involved in the community. Cool stuff. I think I could send you guys like maybe his profile or anything. Yeah. have 7. We have 1 more. Oh, no, that's thing. Just we're missing 1 vote.
In the Zoom, Liza said she's abstaining.
Yeah,
Okay.
sorry, Hennessy. I just, my federal position, I'm not allowed
Okay, okay, okay.
to
No, thank
participate,
you.
but yeah,
No
thanks
worries. Thank
everyone
you.
for voting. I appreciate it.
All right, so for the people that we have, I think that that's good. Vote ended results. As you can see, they were voted in unanimously, which is great. So we're gonna move on. So Joe will help me lead this. We're gonna move on to the discussion. We wanted to open this up because it's the first meeting and because we have a lot to talk about. We wanted to discuss what you guys think the subcommittee, your roles, and the relative subcommittee timelines should look like specifically. This is to start. And we also wanted to see what you guys thought about overlap of the subcommittee roles of this subcommittee with other subcommittees, and what your boundaries are, what your timelines are, what you're going to focus on for your archives or for curriculum specifically. So we can start with what you guys think the subcommittee, your roles, and relative timelines might look like. And I will put this in the chat.
I'm just going to jump in because I know Hennessy and I had a longer conversation about this earlier, and just to give a little bit more context. One of the things that we were concerned about was the need for the various subcommittees to be done in different time periods. For instance, the other subcommittee, which this somewhat deals with the overlap in subcommittees, is much more about dissemination products and events, and we're a little bit more of the data side of things. So it seemed like an obvious, we may need to be front loading a lot of our committee's work, as opposed just to make it so that the other subcommittee has the ability to go forward fully informed by our work. But also wanted to make sure that we understood that everybody's extremely booked and busy. And I know Hennessy's been struggling to find times for everybody to show up in a meeting together. So, but given that, what role do we want to play overall in the gathering of data, the processing of data, the uncovering of new data versus working within existing known products and known activities within ours and many other organizations. That's kind of some of the conversations that we've had. That's about where we got to, was just to say that those are the conversations we need to have, and then we brought it to the committee.
This is actually my first meeting, and I'm just wondering whether or not there's a charge for the committee, for the subcommittee.
Yeah, I mean, I can read what the subcommittee, what the ordinance says for the subcommittee. And 1 second. All right, so the goals of the Timelines, Archives, and Curricula Subcommittee include recommending a timeline of significant historical events in Boston to comprise the focus of the Commemoration Commission's work over the coming years, planning content for exhibits throughout the city that educate participants on the diverse history of Boston, determining how to save, process, and highlight Boston's rich archival resources, including through digital archives, and incorporating archival history and commemorative activities into the Boston Public School curriculum. The subcommittee will also recommend how collections can be made accessible and inclusive, as well as recommend how the archival capacity of all communities can be supported and expanded. It says within the first 6 months of convening, the subcommittee shall produce an initial recommended timeline of key occasions to be the focus of the commission's commemorative work through December 31st, 2030, to be approved by the full commission and presented to the speaker. And I can send you guys that as well through the chat.
I can jump in. It's my first time here too. I'm a historian, but I do contemporary history. So I'm less my expertise is less in kind of revolutionary period. For me, the big anniversary coming up is the 50th anniversary of desegregation. So if we're thinking about timeline, that's like now. So I would say if we're prioritizing things, you know, June is when Garrity released his order, and then September is when desegregation started. So I don't know if that is not considered part of our charge, or if the city already has plans for it. So I don't know. If that, I would put that at the top of our list, given that the time is pressing.
I mean, it says 250, 400, and other significant historical anniversaries. So I think, you know, 250 and 400 are going to be significant for tourism, but that doesn't mean that we should not be taking up the charge of significant anniversaries for the city of Boston and for its residents.
I think it's a really interesting question, and Tatiana, I appreciate you bringing up the 50th, because the 50th, like the ideals and the questions that is rallied around, all tied to these earlier questions from 250 years ago anyhow. And I think the Park Service's take is that we're organizing our 250 around the questions that were asked 250 years ago, that every successive generation has asked and has to find their own answers to. And 50 years ago, with the whole desegregation issue, it's a whole new set of people galvanized around a question set. So I'm really intrigued with not excluding that, but rather saying, how might we organize and call attention to that and use that as potentially a case study for showing how we can curate, call attention to experiences, exhibits, etc. The only thing that's nerve-wracking is it's June. And like that's here and now. I know the Park Service is doing stuff around that anniversary. So I don't know if we could like galvanize and call attention to some things so that people can begin to realize we're not talking about dates 1,000 years ago. We're talking about things that are very recent. And in fact, this is a call to action for people to continue to do the hard work of civil rights. And to ask fundamental questions about who we are as a people, and what is independence, what is liberty, what is our voice, what is our role.
Well, so is it possible to tack on to events that are already being planned, perhaps, that we don't have to invent
Yes.
something?
Absolutely.
So there are 2 anniversaries that we are marking this year here at the MHS with programs that are already on the books, and one is the 20th anniversary. Joan, you'll know this, of gay marriage in Massachusetts. And we also have a conference coming up that marks, this is not a good anniversary, but it's the 100th anniversary of the Immigration Act of 1924 that limited immigrants from Southern and Eastern Europe. So we certainly think that it's also important to mark occasions that are not so good, and what that tells us and teaches us about how people at different times thought about what was important for their respective societies.
That's great. I also have like the calendar that I created for the Commemoration Commission. It's open and accessible to the public. So if you guys want to send me these events so that I can create like calendar things for them and publicize them on the website, that's like a little way that we can start kind of getting the ball rolling. And that's just one part for like publicizing these things. But
I want to just bring out a little bit later in the agenda, we were going to take each of the 3 existing components, and one of the other questions is, should there be more components of our subcommittee, the archives, the timelines, and curricula, and discuss how we as a group would like to populate those things, as it's really at this point kind of a data gathering phase, and both the methods of how we're going to collect that information, and then also how we're going to share out that information. But I think that it's also critical that we don't have a lot of boundaries on dates, because we don't need to, so we shouldn't. Because as soon as we start adding dates to things, we're going to be excluding people, and that should be the opposite of what we're trying to do here. But I think that, and I don't mind going out of order from the agenda, but at the same time, there's a component of this where we're going to be strategizing how do we do these things as well. Hennessy, should we go to the overlap discussion just so we can kind of get into the boundaries as soon as
absolutely.
possible? Sure. So just so that I wanted to kind of ask kind of everybody, are we comfortable being kind of the data production committee? What that would mean is that while we're talking about promoting events, et cetera, that's really, at least the way I read the legislation, that's really the other subcommittee's role. However, making that committee aware that the MHS is coming up on two big events and that we have all these both local and national events coming up. I feel like that's our role to make sure that folks are aware of those, folks in that committee are aware of those events and also of those anniversaries through making of a timeline. Are we comfortable being that in this particular role? Do we want to expand upon that role?
I'm glad you're asking that question. Because yeah, I think we are, but I guess I don't know where. I think when we had the larger meeting, and then also the meeting that many of us attended, where there's a conversation about historic preservation in the city and kind of overall goal, like higher level goals. I was hearing all this talk about like story collecting and everybody being a part of the story and all of that. And it's not clear to me where that fits in. And I know like there are people here in this Zoom room who have been doing that kind of work, who kind of hope and want to do more. And I definitely would count myself in on that. And so I don't know where I mean, and thanks for reading the charge, Hennessy, because there is some sort of expanding the data kinds of language in there. I just don't know whether that's part of what this group is supposed to be doing or not, or who would do that if we don't. So that's more of a question than an answer.
It seems to me like it's more our role than the other subcommittee's role. And I think that the term archive needs to be an incredibly vague term. And I feel like that would kind of fit under that role of, places where information comes from. Um, and that one of those things that we should probably discuss is how much do we as a group, as a subcommittee, want to be creating versus supporting, because I feel like there's a role that we could play as actually finding the solution to that very question, Carolyn. But there's also another one, which would be, could we find an organization that's already leading that charge or several organizations where we can help consolidate access to those organizations and disseminate or helps the other subcommittee disseminate that information. But yeah, I think oral history is such a critical part of this, in addition to all the other ways that we're going to be recording information.
And can I just follow on a little bit? Thanks, Joe. I mean, looming in my mind are the neighborhood histories that were generated for the bicentennial. And I'm also sort of wondering about that. It's kind of related, but separate. And now I'm going to just let other people chime in.
Yeah, I put a link to the 1970, the bicentennial oral histories, because the city, thank you very much, city archivists who are here, digitized all of those. And I don't even know how many there were produced. But they had neighborhood subcommittees, and those folks actually went out and essentially like interviewed their friends. But it must have been, I can't imagine that something that large scale could have been done without funding for the bicentennial, but but like I said, I don't have access to the administrative records from this time period.
Yeah, we're not really sure about the funding. I mean, it was all done under the Boston 200 commission, which seemed to be, similar to this commemoration commission, but I think they may have had a lot more funding than how it is currently. And we do have, there's probably about 180 or so recordings that were done. Some of those are part 1 and part 2, so it's not 180 people, but there is a considerable amount of oral histories that were done.
I was gonna say that in terms of like our charge and I mean, I would if I were to just say what I would like, I do think we're not just collecting data, we're curating it and thinking about, even, for example, so I conduct oral histories too, and one of the things that I know is that folks often reach out to ask, where are the oral histories? And folks who are unfamiliar with archives, they really don't know where these different collections are, like at Northeastern, which archives are available, particularly talking about, marginalized populations, Black, Latinx, queer. So I do think that could be something if we think about we're creating a timeline, but we're also curating resources on the city's marginalized populations. So like, where are all the oral histories? So like the thing you dropped, Jordana, like many of us are familiar with that. Your average person is not, your average student is not. So thinking about like curating, I also feel like there's a big piece in our charge about the Boston school curriculum. And I don't know if we have folks from the schools here, but yeah.
Not here, but there is one person who is the designee from Boston Public Schools.
Okay, so we do have somebody on our committee, because to me, when, that was a huge piece of it that I thought was really interesting, why I was also interested in it. But I mean, I do think we're playing a more active role if we're like, consulting on Boston Public School curriculum, for example. And then the last thing I would say is, I don't really know what the relationship is going to be with the events, exhibits, trails committee, but it seems a little, I don't know how I feel about, like, are we just supposed to suggest like, hey, these are big dates, can you organize an event? Like, that seems weird to me, to not have any like discussion. So I don't know if maybe we think about having some joint meetings with that group once we've come up with dates and ideas, or and then have them take the lead on the event planning piece. But I think part of our charge, from what I read, is the timelines and archives. The idea is that we're trying to make these archives accessible to the public and in the public's eye, and inform these programming pieces. So yeah, I kind of don't see it just as data collecting. And I would like to work more collaboratively with the other subcommittees.
I want to throw into that, because we are going to be functioning kind of as the city's, not we, but like the overall commemoration commission, as the city's leading team of people working towards the big anniversaries. And from the outside of the city, it's going to be the 250th and the 400th, a lot of attention on those. That means that the folks that are interested in pursuing information about that will likely be coming to Hennessy specifically, and then through her disseminating out to the other the subcommittees and the members of the subcommittees. So I think that while we're working on this, we should also be expecting that we will get feedback from hopefully the general public, but we can also get we will also likely be getting inquiries from people that are trying to figure out what is the city doing, what as a community, not the capital C, but the lowercase c doing for the various anniversaries. So we're going to be that as well. Probably predicting the future. So generally speaking, it seems like we are going to be both curators and creators, and kind of helping push the other committee in directions that we would really like to see them do. And if they don't, we will do that ourselves because we can. Because that's the nice thing about this is, like, I think we get to design our own goals around all of this. So if there's something that we actually want to do, we can just do it. Because there is no specific thing that we've been tasked to do other than to work on these various kind of themes. And I think those are more suggestions than requirements.
Yeah, I will say I think that the document as a whole of the ordinance is vague and maybe intentionally so that we have some leeway to produce certain things. I think that it would be a disservice of this group of people if it's just like we think of what the exhibits people are can do, right? Because there's so much that you guys are already doing, that I think we just have to get more creative than the ordinance is.
I think one of the things that is sort of like terrifying about having a very broad sort of expansive, you can do anything, is that you could do anything. So framing it up seems like it would be super, super helpful. I think this idea that Tatiana's put in there about, is there like a website or a toolkit or something that can be put together that allows us to at least frame up like what we're seeking, what we're looking for, but then holds up what's available so that people can use data that is curated and readily accessible to support their own goals and initiatives. Seems like it should be framed within a larger, I don't know, maybe it's a questions that are saying about like, what is Boston? Who is Boston? Who are we? Because that's part of the goal of the commemoration, right? To hold up what is the city of Boston and who are we as a people. I wonder if this is that effort to get collections and stories put together that really do shine a light on who we are, have been, might become as a people. And that, I mean, that's a way of, bringing this into Boston public schools as well, which I agree, that was like my interest, was to sort of like help BPS sort of shore up sort of inquiry by young people as to who we are so they can see themselves.
Hennessy, I think we need to go into the next one because I think we were kind of circling around some really good things that we need to kind of start nailing some stuff down.
For sure.
Should I keep going with that?
Yeah.
Okay, so I managed to have too many tabs open on my computer and can't find the agenda. Sorry. All right, so our three components are timelines, archives, and curricula, and related to everything that people have been saying, and Tatiana, what you've been putting in the comments. What makes sense to me, and if it doesn't make sense to you all, please change the plan, we need to figure out some way to collect data. We need to find some way to put that data in a public space and then encourage others to add to the data beyond what we've been able to collect. It seems to me like two of our components are almost list-based in some ways, and the third is not. So maybe we can focus on the two list-based ones first, because it may be a similar methodology for collection. My initial thoughts were the team here, the subcommittee, begins a list, and then we come up with some way to survey other members of the commission, and then also survey the general public, so that we can start gathering what are the Boston archives that are related to these things, or even regional if that's important too. But also, what are the dates in the events that we want to put on a timeline of things that are coming up in the near future. And I'll stop there to see what people think about that concept, and then we can start talking about kind of what that actually is as far as collection and dissemination goes of those informations. Does anyone have tools that they prefer and like for those types of things? Would anybody be opposed to a Google Drive doc that we can share amongst ourselves to begin the list making?
Yeah, that's what I suggested, some sort of Google Drive. I think it's easy. I mean, I think we just need to start thinking about organization. Like, I think we need to do a lot of work before we start polling people and asking. I mean, I think part of it is like, how can we dump all of our stuff first and find a way to structure it? So maybe instead of just having like one Google Doc, we have like one like list of key anniversaries, dates or things, and then another one. Here are like archival collections relevant. And another one, like, here's something on curriculum. I don't know, like kind of split our charge into several pieces and we just start dumping things in. And then maybe at our next meeting, we can try and make sense of it before we start asking the rest of the commission and the general public to start contributing. I kind of feel like we need to assess what we know and what we don't know first.
So yeah, I think Hennessy and I can definitely put together 3 documents, share amongst the team here. Hennessy, how many people are total in this subcommittee?
There are 15 people total.
15.
So what I can do, instead of just having it be docs, I'll create a Google folder. That way we can have a folder where we can put like documents, spreadsheets, things like that. I can also include, I have constituent comments that I have been getting, so people have been asking that I think that you guys should see. So I can make a copy and put that in there. So then you guys have just like a folder where you can see what the public is saying, have a place for spreadsheets, have a place for working documents, things like that. I'll do that and I'll send that over.
The spreadsheets makes a lot of sense too. So we can have a link, a description, and the date. This will also help us figure out what's our like incredibly pressing things that are coming up in June, and in some cases are happening probably today as we go through these things because everything's happening so quickly now. Date wise, do we want to have any boundaries at all on the dates in the timeline? My gut reaction is no, but I'm really curious to hear what other people feel.
That's how I also feel. I tried to unmute. I also can't use Zoom today. But yeah, I think if we limit ourselves to the 250th or the 400th, we're missing a lot of really important parts of what make Boston Boston, and issues that we're still contending with today and conversations we can have around those. So yeah, so I agree. It shouldn't be limited. We're not, oh, never mind. I was gonna say, we're not certain museums that only talk about 1 year. But that's not anyone here. So
Not today. The other thing too that I think within the scope of the timelines, especially in therefore archives, do we want to differentiate between a local anniversary like Battle of Bunker Hill and a national anniversary like the 250th of America? Because those are two different events with like a local scale and a national scale, and obviously a lot of local stuff has broader implications. Do we want to have any sort of differentiation or any sort of priority?
could those be like check marks on the spreadsheet that Dory was mentioning?
Sure.
Because they're definitely, I was gonna say, thinking about marriage equality, because I'm the gay historian. That's really specifically Massachusetts based, but then it becomes a much longer fight and conversation over the next, I think it took us 14 or 15 years to get marriage equality for other folks around the country. But even with school desegregation, Boston's not the only city that that went through a similar busing crisis. There are a lot of connections we can make, I think. So yeah, I think at this point in the brainstorming, including that as a, either a checkbox or a place where we can leave notes about, this is Boston specific or this is neighborhood specific. And, here are ways that we can go beyond the kind of micro history that we could really get into here, which is both exciting and like means the list will never end.
Well, does it have to end? I kind of actually really love the idea of tiny little micro histories. And one of the questions that I put into the document was, are we planning to reach out to neighborhood historical societies for input? And, and maybe that's a good way of saying like, okay, what are your thoughts about the, top 20 or whatever, based on that.
Carolyn?
Yeah, just building off of that, Giordana, like working with the historical societies is a great idea, but also like as we think about what are our categories in our spreadsheet, it's obviously we care about who, like people, so groups of people. That could be also almost endless, but I think that our intention is to have a very inclusive view of what the past is and what past matters. And so just having, trying to get a handle on our communities would, I think, be a good idea. And I know that's just like, I don't know, again, it's a huge task, but important, I think, to start at least some of our thinking with the people whose histories we're talking about, like this question that Liza's raising about who we even are. So the who, and then I also think back to Giordana, like the places, the neighborhoods. I mean, Boston does have its framework for defining neighborhoods, and I think that's a tool we can use as well. And there's a political structure there too to sort of tie in terms of people we can liaise with.
So were you thinking about data like asset mapping, like community asset mapping?
Is that up to me or Carolyn? Sorry.
You.
Okay. I think it was more of, well, at this point, it's really just a list times two. But I think some of it is like Carolyn was saying, we really need to know who needs to add into that list that is not represented in this group. It's an asset mapping situation, but I think we're not quite there yet. And Tatiana had a comment about adding or discussing the list in our next meeting, which I think is a great idea. But related to that, Hennessy, when theoretically would our next meeting be?
I have scheduled it for March 5th.
March 5th.
March
So
5th. Same time
that's
as this one.
a little less than a month from now. Are we comfortable with that list remaining within our subcommittee development for the next month? Or do we want to invite others to it before our next meeting? No, okay. All right, that's easy. It's less work than making a poll in the next couple of days and sending it all out. But yeah, okay, great. That's the answer to that.
I just put a timeline in the chat, which is was built a few years ago during the resilience and racial equity work happening in the city. And basically it was just put together by a whole bunch of people who work in the field of racial equity. And it's not perfect, but it sort of outlines all of the major push and pull moments in Boston's racial equity history. And, I mean, of course, oh, you did? Oh, that's wonderful. That's great. Yeah. So, I mean, thinking about ways in which, politically, I love the idea of centering non-whiteness in this group. And, I know that we obviously can't forget. We also need to make sure that we're paying attention to all of the various different options in the city of Boston's history. But I also think that, and queer and trans folks, of course. So just, thinking about ways in which we can decenter the idea of white male monument people.
Does anyone know that the platform that this timeline is hosted on or created through? I don't recognize.
I made it. Yeah, it's timeline.js.
Do you recommend it?
Definitely. It's basically, so, once we have our spreadsheet, basically, if you put it into, it basically takes a Google spreadsheet and makes this happen. And it's free. So we've made like a ton of these, and even if we wanted to start listing out our entries in the spreadsheet format that they use, it might even be a good way of getting this populated very quickly.
Sure. Hennessy and I'll take a look at that. One thing that I'm thinking ahead with, and this is definitely a question for the group. So I'm running the archaeology page for the boston.gov page. Hennessy has the commemoration commission page. In theory, that commemoration commission page can be broken up into many smaller pages. Do people feel comfortable with that being where a lot of the work that we're doing lives, or is that something for a future discussion once we actually know what this stuff looks like? Because I'm thinking about a timeline like this, if we were to create a timeline, like an actual timeline, and not just a spreadsheet, there's maybe a technical limitation, Hennessy, that we should look into about hosting things like this on boston.gov, because I know we can do some things, but not everything. Or we can link to someone else that hosts it. But it would be great if whatever we put this was a functioning in and of itself completely.
Well, I mean, if you can't, then I'm happy to host it. We have lots and lots of space and WordPress instances that we could make one for you. But certainly, you know, putting it in the Boston city infrastructure would probably make the most sense.
Also really helps with Google finding. That crawler crawls it so frequently that things really get up there in a hurry. This is a beautiful timeline, by the way. And
It was a labor of love. I think, you know, I think most importantly, what I like most about it is that I didn't make it. It was this very, you know, all of the race equity workers that that the city had convened for the resilience and race equity. They were the ones that created it. And then we also workshopped it around where we actually had poster boards with this on a map and also on a timeline, and we're like, add things we're missing. And we actually were able to, so, you know, we were able to get a whole bunch of other entries that the group had missed and add them to this list.
related to that, while we're creating a list of archives, we haven't talked about curriculum all that much, but while we're creating a list of archives and a list of time dates, how do we, and if so, how should we record where we are self-identifying holes that we need to pursue actively? I don't know if there's room in the timeline to say like, you know, we need more Native history, that kind of thing, or if it's a separate document that really acknowledges like, here's where we think we really need to make sure that one, are other people in the commission, but then maybe even beyond that, the general public and really hubs of people within those organizations and communities that can really help support that. But should we be collecting that as we create these? Does anyone have any suggestions as to how to record that?
I mean, it could be another tab on a spreadsheet or
Okay.
a separate spreadsheet, but I think, you know, doing it as we're going along, that's when it will become obvious.
Spreadsheet tab makes sense, yeah. Kind of figured about tabs and spreadsheets. I don't ever use them. The hidden information. Is everyone comfortable with that? Okay.
And
no,
Joe, I think
event if we acknowledge a community that is represented in our community here that we don't know as much about each other, that will be okay. Safe space. Yeah. Sorry, Jordan.
I mean, speaking of communities, I mean, no one's really done any community asset mapping around various different historical institutions in Boston. And I wasn't sure if that was part of who's gonna do that? You know, like, where are the historical societies? Where are the historic houses? And, you know, I mean, Joe, your work with even just like tracking which are the Boston's oldest houses, like, until you wrote that book, nobody knew.
Yeah.
And so thinking about, you know, where are the sources of information about these things that we can locate, or even just like, where are all the archives? You know, I know that there's like 6 just on Huntington Ave, you know, and they all have different specialties, but it would be really, really great. And, you know, and MHS and KID and they usually convene people once a year. But is there a way that we can, you know, reach out to these folks on a more regular basis? And just to like, you know, what are the survey of archives?
Related to that, we should definitely have a tab for address. That's not just like the location of, not just like an online repository of like, these are all the data associated with X, but these are the actual repositories as well. And Hennessy and I have access to ArcGIS and story maps. that we can create, I think something like that. Has anyone used Story Map specifically for, okay. Is everyone comfortable with that? Because that I know we can host on boston.gov.
You know, even if folks aren't familiar with ArcGIS, you know, we can put it into a kind of format for structured data in a Google sheet pretty easily, as long as the fields would be able to map over to ArcGIS. And I mean, I've also used Google Maps, the My Maps, to create something super easy where you can actually just like click and put a pin someplace.
That may actually work better only because when the city does mapping, I don't know about story maps. When the city does mapping, it tends to cluster things into these like numbers, let's say 5, and then you have to click on that and then zoom in. And it's not really that spatial, directly spatial data, even though it technically is. So that might be really helpful. But either way, I think there's CSS or CSV uploads to both, and so
Yep.
we can pick them both and see which one we like, basically.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, dump the data into one system and then be like, yes or no, we'll see.
Yeah. Kayla, thank you. Dory, thank you. Not keeping up with the chat, sorry. Okay. Are we comfortable moving to curricula, or do we still want to talk about timelines and archives and kind of what we're planning on doing? Essentially, it sounds like Hennessy and I are gonna prepare the infrastructure and get it out to you all soon, I hope. I can work, I set aside an hour after this meeting, and at this rate, we're looking at finishing potentially even early. I can start working on it right away and make sure that we all have that while it's kind of fresh in our minds. And then, does that sound good so far? And then next month, we'll kind of start to look at that and examine where the holes are and how we're going to proceed from there. Okay. So curricula. This is where I'm weakest as far as my knowledge, so I really am going to rely on a lot of you all for that. The one thing that we have done internally at the archaeology program is we've gone through the Boston Public Schools curricula standards and started to kind of do a much shorter version of those as far as where the social studies, but non-social studies as well, because I don't think this stuff should live exclusively in the history world. But from there, I think we can kind of see where our timeline and archives really match. I can share that document out. Not right now because I didn't open it first, but do other people have standing curricula or suggestions as to how we should pursue the curricula? And also, bigger question, are we even looking at just BPS curricula standards, or do we want to look broader than that? Discuss.
I would just say I'm interested in the curricula piece. I know that I consulted for Facing History in Ourselves. They put together a new 8th grade social studies unit on Boston Public Schools in the 60s and 70s. I think reaching out to them, I think there's just content experts we could reach out to in the Boston Public Schools who do the curriculum development. And also professional development. I had put that in the working doc, who's running the professional development. I know I do things for Teaching as Scholars, which is an organization that does professional development for different schools. And it just, from what I gather, working with a lot of BPS teachers, there's a huge interest and want for more on kind of racial history and just marginalized populations. I mean, and these are folks who were teaching in BPS who don't really feel strong even teaching about, desegregation. So I can only imagine like queer history and things that are just completely outside of their framework. I think we should just reach out to people in the schools. I'd like to expand beyond the public schools. I'm a Dorchester resident. My children do not go to Boston Public Schools. So I don't know if we want to think about just like Boston area schools. But I think there's a lot of other, I don't know, I think we need to do collections. And I can volunteer to do some of that. I mean, the whole conversation where you were all talking about like different, I don't know anything that you were talking about all of those story mapping. I don't do any of that. Just a traditional historian and professor, but so that's not my strength. So maybe y'all can do that. And I mean, I am happy to volunteer. And if anybody wants to help, we can maybe divide and conquer and just reach out to people and start collecting. I want to know what they're doing first and make no assumptions of what they're not doing or whatever. Find out what schools and teachers are doing and what they'd like to see. Because I'm sure if you talk to administrators, they'd say, oh, I'd love to learn more about X history, and then we could put that on our tab of gaps. I know, for example, I've done PDs at like the Hernandez School, and there's very little on Latino history. So they may have developed a strong unit on kind of African American civil rights, but nothing on other racial groups. I know that certain schools in Chinatown are trying to recover the history of Chinatown. So I think we kind of need to do a little, that is maybe like not a survey, but just kind of reaching out to individuals in the schools and finding out.
I certainly would be thrilled to have you help spearhead that, because you've said a lot, like the story maps, you said a lot of things that I was not aware of going on, and people that I do not have any connections with, and I would appreciate that for sure.
Yeah, and Hennessy, I mean, anybody else, I think, was it Liza who said you're interested, or whoever else, maybe we can just shoot a little email and divide and conquer. And I don't know, Hennessy, who the person from the schools was. That's probably our best resource first,
Yes.
right?
Yes, it's Dr. Headley Mitchell. I don't know if you guys know her. She does curriculum development, so it's actually very, very up our alley. So I will probably send her this. She can make it, but it would be good for her to know what you guys are thinking of to see if she would like to help. On another note, I think it'd be interesting to see how we could think about internships for students, and that being a kind of supplementary thing to curriculum. It's a little bit easier for us to kind of give that support, but that's one an option.
Tatiana, can you help clarify for those of us that are not as tied into the curriculum world? When someone says curriculum, are we talking about providing information for teachers to develop curriculum? Or are we talking about developing curriculum to give to teachers to then follow the curriculum?
Yeah, so, well, it depends on where you're talking. I mean, but in the public schools, the teachers are not creating curriculum. They actually have to follow a standard curriculum. And so I think what we need to do is find out what their curriculum is, which sounds like that person can tell us, and then figure out how that is being taught. What is their professional development around it? Are they interested in building new units, curricular units? And again, it doesn't have to be confined to history or social studies. But I do think there's interest. And yeah, and then I think with the private schools or other options, Catholic schools, they have different curriculum, different sets. A lot of them have a lot more autonomy. So I think it's first evaluating and I guess part of a question is what are we asking them? What do you teach about the history of Boston? I mean, I think at the very basic level, what do you teach about the history of Boston beyond the Tea Party? And seeing what they say and what their interest is. Obviously, they have their own curriculum mandates. My husband's a high school principal, so that's kind of why I'm a little bit in that world, but just not in BPS. But I think there's they obviously have curriculum frameworks they have to follow. They have things they need to meet. So I don't know where they'd want to add it or not. I'm in ethnic studies, so I think you can add it anywhere. I think it'll help them become better writers and readers and all the things. But I also know that they have a new ethnic studies, pretty new in the last couple of years. Now Boston Public Schools requires ethnic studies. So yeah, I think we need to figure out what they have first, and if they want to create. I don't want to assume that anyone wants to create units on queer Boston, although that's what I want to do. So I think we should just ask.
I just put up in the chat a webarchive.org web blah 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 blah, and this was a curricular unit that we helped put together with the social studies department when they had a social studies department at Boston Public Schools, and for whatever reason they took down the actual. So I found it in the Internet Archive, and so that's why it's got a funny URL. But I think something like this is sort of where they would be heading. And and once we talk to folks at BPS, they might want to crib off of something like this that's already been created, with some modifications. And this is just DSEG. This is not like any of the other things that we could focus on.
Another kind of fundamental question related to curricula. Is our I don't even know what the words are, the verb, but are we reaching out to talking with, is our audience teachers, or is it like the administration of schools slash school groups when it comes to curricula? I don't fully understand who we're really producing these for.
Liza?
Yeah, I'd be happy to I mean, BPS has deconstructed its sort of like central office for curricula, which is what Jordana just spoke to. There is no social studies department. So the schools function in some ways as a very siloed group. And it can be tricky to work with in that respect. So we moved from like working centrally to now working deeply with 4 schools and kind of galvanizing interest that way. So I think that is part of the question to ask an insider, if there's an insider that's on this committee, to sort of figure out what might be good. What I will say is we have put a lot of time and attention into trying to build a community of practice around place-based teaching and learning. So we have a teacher institute every summer. Teachers, from our experience working with teachers, are not that interested in, many teachers don't have the capacity to create their own curricula. They need a lot of support, a lot of work, which this group could help with. But I think trying to galvanize Teacher Institute and creating a lot of curricula could be tricky, but finding out what their needs are and then working with them to support curricula development is probably the way to go. It's definitely, it's been very, very challenging.
Yeah, I was just going to add, I think one of the things the teachers always say is, can you just give me something? Can you just, and they love when I just curate. They're like, I don't know how to find primary sources.
Right.
Just curate a little unit for me.
It's exactly right.
Yeah. So I think, again, if we think about our role, first of all, talking to the curriculum people, I don't want to overstep. I think talking to the curriculum people and seeing, and all the administrators first, but seeing how we might be supportive. I do think curating sets. I love that. Again, I'm talking to Jordana, but at Northeastern, when I send my students and there's like, these are all the resources on Latino Boston. These are all the resources on Asian Boston. Like, that is just what they want. And
Yeah.
I think teachers would love that if we could create something for teachers that, just has pre-allocated sources. I think that might be something they're interested in.
That is definitely the #1 request we've gotten. Please give us like curated content so that we don't have to go and search. So if there were like thematic or around an essential question set, to get at what would help teachers.
It seems to me like that product is outside of the other subcommittee's role as well. I think it seems like curriculum is soup to nuts, not just the idea of the curriculum, but the product at the other end. So that can definitely be something that we are spearheading. And I love knowing that there's a product that people want and we can produce those. That sounds really exciting. But yeah, and definitely something we can do. Tatiana, are you comfortable taking that forward and then kind of coming back with like update in March?
Yeah, maybe Liza, I don't want to volunteer you. Liza,
Yeah.
and anybody else want to, maybe we can just chat via email real quick, yeah?
I saw Colin suggest that he would like to be part of it as well,
Sure.
or involved. Yeah.
We're gonna help with everything, so just include me and I will help where I can.
Okay, so with that, the next thing on the agenda is basically an open-ended question of, we have 3 components. We have timelines, we have curricula, we have archives. Is there anything fundamentally missing that we can't encapsulate by opening the umbrella wider under those titles that we really want to make sure that our core group can produce or do? That may also come out of additional work, realizing where the holes are. Okay, that's an easy one. And then the fourth thing on our agenda is goal setting and discussing goals. Hennessy, I believe your 6-month goal was, or from the, I don't want to say it's your goal, the 6-month goal from the legislation was a timeline, correct?
Yeah.
And it was due December of last year? Okay,
Yes.
all right.
Um,
Do we want to start talking about some of what our goals could be in the next, and 6 months may actually be too long from now. I feel like there's goals that we can meet earlier, much earlier than that, I hope. Do we want to set some goals? Does anyone feel comfortable even doing that at this point? Are we too early in the process? Yeah, I second Tatiana's request. Hennessy, can we share that? Okay.
yes, we have on the little website that I sent a long time ago, I put a spreadsheet with, and I put also a whole bunch of information, but I don't know if that's the most convenient thing for people. So I will re-upload on the Google Drive.
If it needs to be simplified, we can put a new one on the folder for this.
But I do.
Does anyone have any goals that we think we can do? Do we think we can do a timeline in 6 months? Do we want to set an earlier goal than that?
What do you guys think is accomplishable in 3 months?
I'm sorry, is the question what a timeline of every significant event we'd like to cover? I'm trying to okay, yeah, I didn't understand what the question was.
No, it's about what we think we can
Oh, our
accomplish.
timeline.
Yes,
Oh, okay.
yes.
Sorry,
yes.
sorry. Okay, got it.
Thanks, Liza. It seems like if we're going to be doing an internal timeline in a month, then it seems like the following month and month after that would be pointing that externally. So it feels like we should be able to have something resembling a draft timeline, or like the initial timeline that inevitably will spark other folks to contribute to it, I hope. It's one of the reasons why I want to get that in front of other people as fast as possible, is to get it so that we hear feedback, because no matter how hard we try, we're going to be missing stuff. 3 months for the initial draft timeline, is that fair? Does it seem reasonable? Are we meeting monthly in general, Hennessy? Yeah, so we'll have 2 more check-ins before then.
So can I just, for my own clarification, repeat that back to you, Joe? So I just want to make sure I understand. So are you proposing that we have like an internal draft document of major events in March, and then have that a version of that to share in March, April, in May?
A version of that has beyond, because I feel like in March we'll have the list of our internal things, and then 2 additional months. My hope would be that that would give us, after discussing it in March and discussing, I think, what else we need to do to get that list populated, that those 2 months would be essentially trying to add as complete of a population as we can to that.
Yeah, I might suggest if at our next meeting, we come back with something filled out in all of these different drive, I might suggest using part of our next meeting to prioritize our next things, because you said, like, let's just say if we went with that, then we did a whole reach out to the public for the next 2 months, and then it's May, and then that date I had mentioned in June is like right there. So I might at least like prioritize based on which events, which anniversaries or moments we want to highlight come, and we prioritize. Okay, we need to rapidly figure out how to curate resources for this event, and kind of go with what makes sense based on the timeline, because we do have more time for other things.
It's true, yeah.
So I would just say that maybe our timeline reflects, we maybe create our timeline at our next one once we know what our list of dates are.
That sounds great. Yeah. Hennessy, what's the points where we cross discuss amongst the I don't know all the terms, what are we calling these things? Subcommittees. What are the times where we kind of reach back to the subcommittees by design?
So by design, we have larger commission meetings, and that's really
Okay.
where we cross pollinate. Larger commission meetings, and the first one is that one's gonna be in April. I'm supposed to send out and figure that out like today. And send that out to hopefully get a quorum of at least 23 of you guys, so that you guys can get together and, you know, talk about what you guys have been working on and potentially how you guys can cross-pollinate. So I have meeting minutes available, or they're going to be available on the boston.gov website. So that's like easy to access and see what they've been talking about, or what you guys have been talking about, so that they can prepare for those bigger meetings.
Yeah.
But they're up to you guys' discretion. They have way to
Something.
conduct
Sorry.
themselves.
Sorry, I think I talked over you at the very end. Can you repeat the last thing you said?
No, yeah, they don't have, there's no formal, you know, way or thing that we need to do to conduct them. So we can really make those larger meetings what you guys need them to be.
In March, we should be able to figure out what we need to really mobilize on getting up to the other committees. And it also sounds like doing that in the actual full hearing may not be fast enough in the case of the things that are coming up this summer. And we're fine reaching out to other committees or other chairs of other committees to say, hey, this is really coming up and we're working on it and you guys need to be ready to know, not that we're not necessarily gonna make them do anything, but like they need to be aware of some of the things that we're realizing are coming up immediately. We can do that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. What things that we do has to be done publicly? Like in this meeting?
Oh, in terms of like, what do you mean?
Well, I know that this is all about transparency and public involvement and everything, and I want to make sure that if we reach out to other members of the committee in between meetings because of timeline,
Yeah.
are we risking any
Open
issues with
meeting law
that?
issues?
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't know. Has been my concern, which is why I haven't been like open emailing everyone, because even emails, open meeting law is really weird and tricky. So I'm not sure. We could do, I mean, my only thought is like, if we have these like cross-pollinated things, they could happen publicly, so we could have a smaller get-together meetings, like office hours, like an office hours kind of thing, where we are having these smaller inter meetings, and people are invited to come and watch, not necessarily comment, because you can have a public meeting without public comment, and people can just see what's going on, or they can put public comment through email instead of while they're there, and that might be a way to make sure that we're still opening that. But I might have to just talk to Tom about it. I think what he says.
Tom's our department lawyer. Hennessy and I work within the same department. Hopefully that will only be an issue at the beginning, because theoretically, the nature of a timeline means the further along we go, the further out we're going. So we'll be more ahead of things automatically than June for most things. But yeah, I don't want to miss those really significant things. And I'm sure there's many others that are coming up on the horizon too.
I will say, I just looked at the ordinance, and it said, it says that anything that we bring to, or any idea that we have is here. Subcommittee will produce initial timeline of key occasions to be approved by vote of the full commission. So I guess whatever work, I don't know, that's kind of not really, yeah. So that might be something.
You don't need to vote on creating a spreadsheet. Yeah.
I'm not really sure what that even means.
Okay.
So yeah, I guess that's kind of just saying, hey, we're doing this. Is that okay? And don't see nothing else, which I can really see why they would.
Sure. Okay, so goals wise, we are going to give ourselves one more month of work before we really start setting things down for that. That makes a lot of sense to me. And I think with that, that leaves us with the open discussion for anything that we haven't talked about. Does anyone have anything else you'd like to share, talk about, discuss, bring up? Airing of grievances related to this, please. Although we're so encapsulating, and pretty much anything could really fall under our subcommittee.
I will add, if you guys have any ideas or anything else that we don't get to here, email me and we can put it on our next agenda for next month.
Would anybody want to work on I know I'm like signing myself up for like bad Jordana, don't sign yourself up for anything. Would anybody want to work on some sort of cultural asset mapping project for archive?
I would be interested in that.
Okay.
I would be down to help. I would have to look into cultural asset mapping, but I'm down to help any way I can.
Okay.
Does that need to wait until the archives list is going, or is it just gonna be easy enough to pull from it whenever needed?
I think they can work in tandem. I mean, you know, I think there's 3-month timeline. I mean, it's gonna take more than 3 months to put together a cultural asset mapping project. You know, it's just, but one of those kinds of things are ongoing depending on how granular you want to make it. So yeah, do you want me to reach out to you, Kid, and
Yeah,
Hennessy, and
that'd be fine.
we can make a plan? Because even if it's just something like we work on in our spare time, that might make some sense.
Yeah.
And you know, and Kid, MHS is the one that keeps the list.
Should be easy to find then.
Yes. All right, great.
Related to archives, do we want to have 2 lists for the archives, one being the actual place, like the archive, and one being the collection? Because I feel like that's different. Like putting City of Boston Archives is really encapsulating a lot of themes, but I also feel like it'd be nice to be able to point somebody to a list that has very specific thematic person, time period related things. Maybe that could be like 2 tabs in the bottom of the spreadsheet, one with archives and one being kind of like we don't want to use the word data, but data sets, for lack of a better phrase, subjects. Thank you, Joan. That was a good option. And because I also want to make sure that I don't want the archives to be just traditional archives. Like there are people who should be listed under archives, like the sachem of the Massachusetts is an archive, and that kind of thing. So big A or lowercase a, however it makes sense. But I feel like there's also like the thematic parts too. Dory?
Thank you. I just shared in the chat an index that that we worked on, Jordana and I, as part of the Boston Research Center, this work across BPL and Northeastern. This is you know, it's a very unfussy looking static site. We're going to be migrating this newest, splashier, more designed site. But the thing that I wanted to show was that this is an index of archival collections and projects pertaining to Chinatown that we created based on feedback from Chinatown residents and folks in the Chinatown Coalition. And there are a couple of different ways of navigating this. You can navigate by collection or by, you know, organization or represented, as well as by repository. So I just wanted to kind of share as, you know, a potentially useful data model.
Yeah, I like that. Do we want to, from this, expand the 2 tabs into more tabs for how to organize that information, or should we just wait until we kind of see what things produce? Because I feel like already this is kind of more than 2 things, but at the same time, anyway, I don't know really what I'm asking.
I had a question about curriculum. I was on the call a little late. I apologize for my tardiness. But I'm just trying to figure out like what this next timeline is. What are we trying to decide as far as curriculum in this next like go round? And have we figured out? I've seen that people were talking about, you know, developing curriculum based on, you know, Chinatown or based on different communities. Is it by neighborhood? I know we talked about making sure that we know what BPS teachers actually want, like what are they looking for. So I guess I'm not clear on what the goal is for developing a curriculum for the next time we meet, or the framework for a curriculum for the next time we meet. Again, I missed most of the meeting, so I just wanted to get like I just wanted to catch up on what that looks like, and I'm just trying to figure out how I can contribute as well based on some of the stuff that I've been doing with my tour company.
Tatiana, do you want to take that or should I?
Yeah, no, you can take it.
Yeah, I can try. So it sounds like Tatiana is going to be working with you, Colin, and I believe Liza as a small kind of subcommittee to look at basically reaching out to schools of multiple types and forms and places and administration to better understand what people are already doing, and then also to try to start identifying the needs of teachers so that we can begin to, one, not reinvent the wheel, but also be able to target what we produce towards the needs that are being identified. Does that cover it pretty well, Tatiana? And next month would be an update on the basically a status update as to where we are on that point, and not quite heading towards specifics yet.
Yeah, I would just add, Colin, since you missed the beginning, I think what we're all trying to do is, just to summarize, is like Hennessy and Joe are creating a drive. It includes kind of our charge and broken down into different parts. So parts on timelines, parts on curriculum, all the different parts. And then we're just going to dump all the information we can over the next few weeks. Everything from what are significant dates and anniversaries to what are great archival sources, what are, we're gonna all dump that. And I think the reason we started talking about curriculum was because folks were like, I don't know what to do. So Colin, if you're down to work with me and Liza, I'll just reach out to you via email. But basically we need to just survey what are the curriculum needs of BPS and other schools to see how we can support them.
Great. And I know that, and I don't feel like I'm very well versed in the standards as far as BPS standards versus the standards for the Massachusetts Department of Secondary Education. Are those two different standards, or like, are we trying to make sure that we follow one or the other or both? Because that's the other thing. We might do something really great that they really like, but then the Department of Education says, no, we can't do it because it doesn't fit the standards, right? Like, so are we looking like statewide or citywide, or is it a little bit of both or just one?
I think that's where we're just going to reach out to the curriculum experts first, and they'll be able to help us out. I think we had generally agreed we're just looking at Boston area schools with a focus on Boston Public Schools, but maybe including other Boston area schools. So I don't think we're limiting ourselves right now to creating anything or thinking about standards. I think it's more, we just need to assess what's being offered currently and what would they want us to do? Is there anything we can do as a committee to support their work? So yeah, Colin, there's a curriculum person who's on our subcommittee, so you may have missed that too. They're just not here. So that's the person we should talk to first and then reach out to other folks.
Great.
Colin,
That's awesome.
this also looks like it's going to be one of the things that our subcommittee really is doing fully all the way through, and not necessarily with any other subcommittee's involvement directly, at least. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you, guys.
Any other topics that we wanted to discuss? Then, Hennessy, do we move it to public comment?
Yes.
Do we have members of the public? We have people that are connected to things on, but not members of the committee technically. But does anybody have anything else that they'd like to add? I don't know if we wait for a specific number of time. That said, I don't see anybody coming off of mute, so I think we're probably good there.
No, we're good. We can for like a minute and then we can end it.
Do we need to vote to adjourn when that happens? Okay.
we can move to adjourn the meeting, you know, we call a motion. Somebody
Oh.
seconds it.
It's just like a person who's not the committee chair, like in typical Robert's rules vibe, or no?
Yeah, I guess.
I don't know. I propose whatever I'm supposed to say to adjourn, and then somebody seconds, right?
Seconds.
Right, so moved.
All in favor? All right. Thank you all so much, and you'll be seeing some information from us very soon.
Thank you, guys.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.